Romanza Festival of Music and the Arts in St. Augustine, May 3rd through 18th, featuring over 40 events like Rock 2x6, a world premiere ensemble arrangement of Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 2, sponsored by St. Johns County TDC. The North Florida TPO is committed to shaping our transportation future. We're focused on planning, funding, clean fuels, and new technologies for a vibrant, connected community. Learn more at northfloridatpo.com. Baptist Health is a proud supporter of First Coast Connect. Baptist Health, committed to building a healthier community for all of us. More info at 202-4YOU or baptistjacks.com.
This is WJCT News 89.9 Jacksonville. Up next, national and local news from NPR and the WJCT News team.
NPR News in Washington, I'm Corva Coleman. The U.S. and Ukraine have signed an agreement that gives the U.S. access to Ukraine's vast mineral deposits. It creates a joint investment fund. It will allow the U.S. to share revenue from that fund with Ukraine as negotiations to end the war with Russia continue. William B. Taylor was the U.S. ambassador to Ukraine under former Presidents George W. Bush and Barack Obama. He says the arrangement works for both sides.
It's fair and balanced on both sides, the American and Ukrainian. Both sides are pleased with it, are satisfied, and both sides will benefit.
But full details of the arrangement were not released. Ukraine has been insisting that the U.S. provide it with strong security guarantees. It does not include explicit guarantees, but the fund can be used for new military aid. Today is Israel's Independence Day. Its annual celebrations regularly include honors to its security forces and soldiers. But this year, those receiving tributes are shielding their identities for fears of reprisal abroad. NPR's Daniel Estrin has more from Tel Aviv.
At this year's ceremony, the names of honored soldiers were classified. Photos of them only showed the backs of their heads. The military says it's to protect them. Pro-Palestinian groups have been publicizing the names of soldiers who served in Gaza, seeking their arrest abroad on alleged war crimes. At another tribute, 3 Israeli Mossad intelligence agents, donning sunglasses and masks, were honored. They were identified as agents who led the operation of the exploding pagers and devices in Lebanon last year, targeting Hezbollah, that killed dozens and injured thousands, according to Lebanese authorities. Daniel Estrin, NPR News, Tel Aviv.
The U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs has ended a mortgage rescue program for veterans. NPR's Quill Lawrence reports housing industry experts fear that thousands of vets and their families will face foreclosure.
The Department of Veterans Affairs set up the VA Service Purchase Program, or VASP, to correct an error with the home loan program during the Biden administration that left tens of thousands of veterans facing foreclosure through no fault of their own. In the less than 6 months it was up and running, VA says VASP saved at least 17,000 veterans from losing their homes. But Republicans in Congress oppose VASP because it has VA buy up the troubled loans. There is a bill in the House to replace it with a different program, but there's no saying when that might make it into law. The VA has now ended VASP despite groups like the Mortgage Bankers Association warning it would lead to thousands of foreclosures. Quill Lawrence, NPR News.
The Labor Department has released its report on weekly jobless claims. The number of people applying for initial unemployment rose by 18,000 last week to 241,000. Tomorrow, the government will release job data for the month of April. This is NPR.
You're listening to WJCT News 89.9 in Jacksonville. Good morning. I'm Stephen Ponson. It's now 9:04. President Trump's former agriculture secretary wants the administration to support adding the Okefenokee Swamp's vast wildlife refuge to a United Nations list of World Heritage Sites. The refuge was nominated at the tail end of the Biden administration. In a letter to the Interior Department, former Georgia Governor Sonny Perdue wrote the Okefenokee nomination has bipartisan support and promises economic benefits. The Blackwater Swamp is the largest national wildlife refuge east of the Mississippi River, covering more than 600 square miles in southeast Georgia and northeast Florida. In the 4th scheduled execution in Florida so far this year, the state is set to execute an Army combat veteran for killing his girlfriend and her 3 young children in Crestview back in 1998. Barring a last-minute reprieve, 62-year-old Jeffrey Hutchinson is set to receive lethal injection at 6 this evening at Florida State Prison near Stark. Hutchinson claims he's innocent, and 2 unknown assailants were the killers as part of a government conspiracy to silence him for his activism against illnesses and other issues affecting veterans from the Gulf War. But yesterday, the Florida Supreme Court rejected arguments that Hutchinson should live because he is not mentally competent for execution. A 5th execution in Florida this year is scheduled for May 5th. It's going to be warm and dry today here in Jacksonville, mid to upper 80s inland, low 80s along the coast.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include the Wallace Foundation, an independent, nonpartisan research foundation collaborating with grantees and partners in the arts, school leadership, and youth development. More at wallacefoundation.org. This is NPR.
Support for First Coast Connect is provided in part by Baptist Health and North Florida TPO.
Good morning, I'm Ann Schindler, and this is First Coast Connect. Today, why a hazardous waste site continues to be a source of outrage and mystery 3 decades after its owners packed up and left. Later in the program, residents of a historic Black beach say they're being treated differently than adjacent resort properties. We discuss a new lawsuit that aims to level the field and stop vehicle access to their Nassau County beachfront. But first, it's been almost exactly 30 years since a local company trafficking in hazardous waste closed its gates and seemingly vanished. But it's far from forgotten. The debate over what the property contains and what will happen next is the subject of a new long-form investigation in the Oxford American, and I'm joined now by its author, Jordan Blumetti. Good morning, Jordan.
Good morning.
So thank you for being here. This is a story you've actually followed for years. What prompted you to revisit it in this Oxford American story?
Yeah, so, initially, I was just driving through Clay County, actually working on another story a couple years ago, and I saw these signs that I referenced early in the piece. And I pulled over, started asking questions with, some of the residents, and I realized that, right away there was a story, an urgent story about the potential development of this property. And then
what were the signs that caught your eye?
the signs were, large signs of skulls and crossbones, hazardous waste symbols, words like cyanide, arsenic, dioxins, things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And
Not what you usually see in a semi kind of rural residential area.
no, not at all. And they abut signs for new developments too, which was a really interesting dichotomy there. So I started kind of poking around a little bit, again, talking to residents, and knew there's a story about the development right away. And then the more I learned about the story, just kind of the stranger it got, the more I learned the history, and started kind of peeling back some of the layers, the stranger it got. And I knew, at that point that there was potential for a longer story. Yeah.
So remind us, this is a story that people who've lived there for a long time will know this history, and so many people don't know a thing about it.
Right.
So remind us, first of all, about the company Solite that used to be located there on that property.
Yeah, so the story, it goes back to the late 50s. A company called Solite, run by a gentleman named John Watts Roberts. They basically they created lightweight aggregate concrete by superheating clay and shale, and it really sort of revolutionized the building process in the mid-century, and it led to some incredible innovations in construction and skyscrapers and bridges, all kinds of things like that. And about 15 years later, they for reasons we can get into, they started burning hazardous waste in the kilns where the lightweight aggregate was being created, and that the allegations are that the byproduct of those burns led to some adverse health effects.
And so they're basically taking this shale. It's kind of a rock that is sort of like almost like the clay that's under the ground.
Exactly. Yeah.
And so they're superheating it. They're creating this product that is able to build, as you say, some really well-known structures around the country. Things like the U.S. Capitol and the Guggenheim.
Yes, there's the renovation to the U.S. Capitol building was used their material. Frank Lloyd Wright's Guggenheim in New York used the material. you know, landmarks, Brooklyn Bridge, Yankee Stadium,
Yeah.
all over the country, landmarks in the nation.
So it's this revolutionary material that's, selling really well.
Hmm.
It's being produced other places in the country, but at some point they discovered that they can burn much cheaper fuels to make it. Tell us what that transition was like and what they started burning.
Yeah. So, that transition happened again in the mid '60s. This was during an oil embargo, and their fuel source it basically vanished overnight, and they were facing they were in dire straits, and they didn't know how they would be able to power the kilns. So it coincided with an outgrowth of you know problems with hazardous waste management in the country. This
What
is
to do with it, how
what
to
to
get
do
rid
with
of
it.
it.
Yeah, we were producing a lot of it at the time, and there was really no controls on it. I mean, the EPA didn't even exist yet. So, the cement kiln industry kind of came forward with this plan that they could burn hazardous waste as fuel. It's degraded, obviously, but they could burn it as fuel in the kilns, and they could produce their product, and they could also get rid of the hazardous waste, at the same time.
And so some of the stuff that they're burning initially are things like spent jet fuel,
Hmm.
waste oil, solvents, and things like that. And they're taking them to kind of, as you report, they're blending them with a cleaner fuel and then burning them. But at some point, you've talked to people who say that they were burning that and much worse.
Yeah, they were burning. I mean, it started with those types of degraded fuels, those spent fuels, but they were taking um, everything from medical waste from hospitals. They were taking um, waste from companies like Sony, waste from they would just take arsenic and things like arsenic and cyanide too, and really kind of whatever they could get their hands on to burn.
And some of it, poisonous. And at that time, this I guess was considered a beneficial use, right? We're using it to fuel our kilns.
Right,
We're getting rid of this terrible hazardous waste, so you don't have to store it anywhere.
right.
And so it ends up being just an enormous amount of hazardous waste, as you report. Give us a little sense of the amount that
Yeah.
they were trucking in and training into the site.
Yeah, there was, I think annually there's about 2 million pounds of hazardous waste that came just to Clay County, and I should mention too at a certain point, they kind of I think the company kind of realized that they can make more money burning hazardous waste than they could with just producing the aggregate. So that's one of the reasons why they just started taking things that really weren't covered by whatever limited regulations did exist at the time. Um, but yeah, they were I think it's 25 rail cars a day. There was about I think 6,000 pounds of ash, dumped into some of the water bodies on the property per day. Um, and it was the byproduct was running off in the water effluent from cleaning the product after it came out of the kiln, and then also smokestacks as well.
And some of the pictures that we're showing, are showing the site as it was left, and then also some pictures of the area today. One of those photos is of this the rail trestle that
Mhm,
leads into the Solite factory, which
mhm.
is sort of iconic for people who might know it. It's like a Leonard Skinner album cover, where they're on this Green Cove Springs
Right.
trestle.
Yeah, yeah, I kind of discovered that midway through working on the story, but the Leonard Skinner practice space was very close to Solite, Florida Solite. That trestle is actually it's not the one that goes directly into it's one of the ones that lead into the property, but it's not the one that goes directly over Black Creek. But yeah, it's right there. I mean, and it's again, I write about this in the piece, but that creek is really, it's central for the residents of Clay County. I mean, that's where everybody spends their time, and it's been traversed for many many years, by all the residents going back to Native Americans.
So we mentioned that at some point Solite packs up and leaves.
Hmm.
And there had been some growing calls, some lawsuits filed in the early 90s, residents saying they're burning hazardous waste.
Hmm.
There was a study done by the American Lung Association that found dioxins and furans
Hmm.
in the fugitive emissions that were
Hmm.
coming off that site. And so there was this growing community pressure about what's going on at this site. Is it a hazard to us? And then they leave.
Yeah, they left. Some of the reasons they cite for doing so were just the cost of doing business got much higher. But that is sort of I think in my opinion it's a euphemism for just for increased pressure from not only the citizens but also state regulators too, because they were in the midst of applying for a new permit that would allow them to burn a lot more hazardous waste, and that's kind of when the screws came down on them.
If you're just joining us, we are talking about a new article in the Oxford American about the Solite plant in Clay County. It's a former hazardous waste site. It remains a community concern. And if you have questions or comments, you can join our conversation. Give us a call at 904-549-2937 or email us at firstcoastconnect@wjct.org. You can also tag us on social media. You talked about the waterways nearby and why that's a concern, but we haven't really gotten into the issue of these ponds that are
Hmm.
on the site. So this property that they own is, 900, 1,000 acres, but the portion of it that was used specifically to manufacture and then to burn this hazardous waste is just a fraction of that.
Yeah.
And on that site, there are a number of these ponds. Tell us what you know about the ponds, what people who've worked there have told you about the ponds, what
Hmm.
they were used for, and how they appeared.
Yeah. Early on, I just really I thought it was a lot of heavy breathing about these things. It was all very abstract until I really went there and started to kind of hear these stories for myself. And it turns out that they have been credible. Everything that I was told for the most part has been independently verified in some way. But yeah, so there's many lakes on the property, some man-made, others not. But there's one in particular that as I was saying earlier, all of the effluent from the actual the kiln itself, it's called a wet scrubber that actually cleans the product after it comes out the other end of the kiln. All that sort of just drained through unlined ditches into a pond which they called the nightlight because it glowed at night because of the allegations are because of the pollutants that were in there. And then there's also right next to on the other side of the scrubber pond, aka the nightlight. There's a freshwater pond where it's alleged that basically all of the equipment was pushed into when they left, very abruptly in '95. And not only that, but equipment for decades that they didn't need anymore. They would just kind of dispose of in there. That's the allegation. And we're talking about dump trucks, cars, catwalks, you know, potentially even like parts of buildings, these types of things. And then there's another lake, a big lake that has kind of man-made peninsulas in it, and a couple of the employees had told me that those peninsulas were built to as burial sites for drums of hazardous waste. And recently a high-resolution drone was flown over that lake as well, and they actually saw what looked to be like a 55-gallon drum floating in it too.
And there was a time when burying big drums of hazardous waste was just really fairly routine. And
Yeah.
you have pictures with your story that show these disintegrating drums that are somewhat half buried on the property. You can kind of see from the other side of the
Mhm.
fence, even
Mhm.
that show, and the folks that you talked to that worked there, the hazardous waste managers that were familiar with this site that toured the site also told you that that was basically what was done. I mean, this was a place that was around from the 50s,
Yeah.
and there was a time when that was just what you did with it.
Yeah, it's true. I read about this a little bit, but that was considered responsible management for a while back, early on in the EPA, when drums were just being dumped really into the middle of the Gulf by some of the largest industrial companies in the country. And that berm that you talk about, yeah, you can see that from the property, from the neighborhood of Russell Landing. There's a chain link fence, and then you could see about a 15-foot man-made berm that was, from what I understand, was built as some flood control or a long time ago. But since it's been eroding lately, you can see that there are actual what look to be fragments of 55-gallon metal drums just poking out of them now.
Yeah. So I just want to kind of move into the present
Yep.
because, we're talking about stuff that happened back before 1995. It's much later than that right
Mhm.
now. What is it that residents are currently concerned about when it comes to this property?
Well, the land has never been remediated. There's actually not. We can't even really get any sort of consensus from regulatory bodies about what the extent of the contamination. So first of all, what their biggest concern is just trying to get a sense of how much contamination there is and where it exists on the property. Obviously, they did some testing themselves of their own neighborhood, what shares a boundary with Solite, and discovered you know cadmium, lead, barium, chromium, arsenic, several other heavy metals, and at levels above what is permitted by FDP and EPA and others below. But so the biggest thing is really getting a sense of what the scope of this contamination is, and then if it is going to be developed, which is there's a lot of people who would like to see that happen. Their concern at that point would be it needs to be cleaned before that happens. Otherwise, they're just going to be downwind of all this, this toxic dust that would get kicked up from the development again.
And you reference a consent order, which is something that is like a legally binding order
Mhm.
that typically a regulator puts on a polluter or a property that says, this is kind of what has to be done to make it right or to clean it up. How long has that consent order been in the works?
It's about 25 years, a little bit more, I think, at this point. It started with the EPA. So it's it bound Northeast, or bound Solite, which became Stone Ridge Farms, to cleaning up the property whenever it was this kind of decided what exactly needed to be cleaned up. When those studies were done, which still kind of have not been fully done.
So
But
has it been enforced? I mean,
it has not been enforced. No, because there's still not really consensus about what exactly is contaminated. And then the consent order was transferred to FDEP along the way as well. I think in 2006, and so it's just been kind of sitting dormant there since then.
what have you heard from regulators? I know you've reached out to them as well as the property owners. What have any of them told you?
Well, the only regulator that I really heard back from officially was the EPA, the Atlanta office, and they basically said that we transferred this to FDEP. You're gonna have to talk to them about it. They didn't really have much to say about it. FDEP, unfortunately, I reached out to them many times, but I didn't really hear back. It was kind of in the midst, towards the end of the piece when I was wrapping up. There was some turnover there. They've also, they've been dealing with some legal issues as well. So I just kind of it didn't seem like a priority necessarily, and I never heard back.
When this first closed, it was labeled a Superfund site,
Mhm.
meaning it was on the national priority cleanup list. And it was later taken off that site. I don't know that everybody's necessarily clear why that is. But more recently, there was a push to put houses
Mhm.
on this property. Can you explain where that proposal stands?
Yeah. So, when the residents first caught wind of this, Kristen Burke, who's one of the sources in the piece, who's a commissioner in Clay County now, she ended up running on this issue among others, but and she was able to. There was a request for rezoning of this property to allow for higher density building on it, and that's actually been part of Stone Ridge Farms, i.e. Solite's plan since right when the plant closed. They kind of announced this that they were going to seek to have this property developed right away. And for whatever reason it took them a long time to sort of get to the point where they're actually presenting plans and had a developer and had some handshake deals in place for the residential units to be built on this property. But yeah, Kristen and the commissioners, they ended up putting a moratorium on rezoning in the wake of this proposal from a developer here in Jacksonville and Northeast Solite. So they said they turned it down, and not only that, but they also they passed a moratorium that wouldn't allow any higher density to be created in the area for the time being until it gets sorted out.
The idea being that they were going to clean up this property before they built the homes?
Yeah, so basically if it changed hands, then it would then if there was money exchanged, then a certain portion of it is earmarked for the cleanup. That's how the consent order works. So in theory, that's what would happen. The unfortunately the dollar figure was calculated a long time ago. It's the general consensus now that it would cost a lot more money to clean up than originally ventured. So, but yeah, that's how it would. In theory, a developer would come in, purchase the land, portions of the cost would go to cleanup, and then he or she can develop the land after that.
We're talking about the legacy of the Solite plant in Clay County, and you can join our conversation at 904-549-2937. We have a call from Tim in Orange Park. Good morning, Tim. Go ahead.
Good morning. Yeah, I used to work for a concrete block company back a few decades ago, downtown Jacksonville. We made Solite blocks, and I'm just going to tell you that product was unbelievably great. It's a very, very good product. And ironically enough, I live about 4 miles away from Russell Road now. But my question is, do they still make that style of block? Because aside from the poisons, I'm going to tell you that was a great product. Thank you very much, and I'll listen off the line.
Thanks, Tim. I mean, yeah. So the problem with this plant wasn't what they were making; it was what they were burning.
Yeah, that's a great question, and they do still manufacture the product along the Hudson Valley in New York at I'm pretty sure it's the last remaining Solite plant. So yeah, it's a great product. The founder, I read about him in the piece. He's a really interesting guy. I mean, obviously very very intelligent and incredibly innovative with this material. It's really impressive what they did, and unfortunately, like everything, there's a shadow side to it. So that's something that they're that we're contending with now. But yeah, it's an incredible product. I mean, look at what it built.
I want to ask you about the larger community and sort of the business community, because when Solite was operating, it had sort of the full endorsement of the local chamber, and was seen as this wonderful economic engine for Clay County. Solite would hold Earth Day celebrations at the plant that the community could come to. What is the sense now of the community at large? Is it just the people who live right near there that are kind of concerned and raising objections? What is the rest of the community saying?
I would say it's predominantly very dubious of Northeast Solite and Stone Ridge Farms. There's a general consensus, not just in Russell Landing, but also kind of the surrounding Green Cove Springs, that we're kind of coming to terms with what this company did all these years ago, and the other thing about it too is that I think people are getting a little impatient with the rate of development in the area too, and some of the the highway that's being built in connecting Jacksonville and St. Augustine in Clay County. There's a certain way of life is kind of being lost in the midst of that development. So they see it as not only dealing with the misdeeds of this company and seeing those borne out by some of the reporting here and the sources and the previous employees, but also just trying to it's connected to the larger development issue right now, which people are really struggling to kind of to swallow.
Yeah, it certainly is a rapidly changing part of Northeast Florida for sure. Yeah. Well, it is a deeply researched article. It is in the New Oxford American by Jordan Blumetti, and we have a link to it on our website. It's a wonderful read. Thanks so much for being here and talking about it.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right. Up next, why residents of American Beach are suing to get vehicles off their coastline. Welcome back. The residents of the historic Black Beach, known as American Beach, filed suit this week against Nassau County for continuing to permit a practice they say is degrading their beach environment and quality of life. Here to tell us about it is Mark Dawkins, resident and chair of Save Historic American Beach. Good morning, Mark.
Good morning. Happy to be here.
We're also joined by the group's attorney, John Henry November. Good morning, John.
Good morning.
So, Mark, tell us, why file this lawsuit now?
Well, we filed the lawsuit after asking the county for the past 35 years to end beach driving at American Beach. So there was a state law passed in 1989 that stopped beach driving on both sides of our community at Amelia Island Resort and Summer Beach Resort, which are on either side of American Beach. And since that law was passed in 1989, we've asked the county to treat us the same and to end beach driving in our community. And the county has ignored us for 35 years. And so we felt that we had no other course but to file a lawsuit to try to end beach driving in our beach and protect the turtles and the dunes.
And so I know that here at Jacksonville today, we reported on kind of an intent to file lawsuit that's required by law. And that happened, I guess, a little over a month ago.
2 months ago.
Okay. And so you filed that. But this is now the official filing of the lawsuit. What are you hearing from Nassau County?
We're not hearing from Nassau County. I mean, they have essentially done what they've done for 35 years and not responded, not to us directly as a community. So I'm not engaged with them. John can speak about the attorneys, but we're not hearing from Nassau County.
Okay. And John, tell us, what does the federal lawsuit say?
It is a suit for injunctive relief and for declaratory relief that Nassau County's beach driving policies are in fact violating the Endangered Species Act, and that's due to the loss and the death of turtle hatchlings there in Nassau County, and also the fact that it's reasonably likely, unless they take additional precautions and protections to the maximum extent practicable to reduce the likelihood of future deaths, that they can't do that anymore in Nassau County.
And I know in your filing, you included some photos, particularly of sea turtles, a sea turtle hatchling that appeared to have been run over by a tire on the beach. Why is it, I mean, we all love sea turtles, but why is it the county's responsibility to do anything about whether or not sea turtles are getting run over?
Due to the fact that the county permits others to drive on the beach, they are then responsible for that driving and any incidental take that happens as a result of that otherwise lawful activity. And so it's our opinion that they have to go through a detailed conservation planning process. And then once they've completed that process, apply for an incidental take permit from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service to ensure that they've done everything they possibly can to ensure that we don't lose these turtles in the future.
The pictures that we're showing on the screen as well show people driving very close to or almost on the kind of lip of the dune. What is the role of beach driving when it comes to just kind of the dune ecosystem, and how is that relevant?
Well, especially for the Endangered Species Act lawsuit, sea turtles typically lay their eggs right at the toe of the dunes. And so the fact that they are allowing beach driving right there at the same place where sea turtles have historically laid their eggs causes a massive conflict. In addition, the tire ruts that occur when 4x4 vehicles drive on the beach makes it very difficult for the turtles to make their way into the ocean. And then lastly, when you compact a sea turtle nest, the eggs in those nests, the embryos can lose the opportunity to be born. So it's on many different fronts that it's important to take all precautions necessary to stop that from occurring in the future.
Can you, Mark, just for people who don't understand, maybe who haven't been to American Beach, how beach driving impacts the folks who live there?
Yes. So let me first say that, we support people using the beach. We want everyone to come use the beach. We think it's a beautiful beach at American Beach. We invite people to come see our museum, learn the history of American Beach. We just don't want driving on the beach. And so how it impacts our community, as John just said, is the sea turtle hatchlings cannot be born on our beach as they can at other parts of the beach. We're one of the few areas in America at Amelia Island where you can drive on the beach. We want the same protection for the sea turtles at our beach as you have at every other beach. One of the other issues is the safety. So if you come out on a weekend, we will have a line of cars from one end of our beach to the other end of the beach. Some of our community people refuse to take their kids out to the beach because it's not safe. We've had incidents in the past in Florida recently of people being run over on the beach. We've had incidents in Nassau County, people being run over on the beach. And so we have kids, we have grandkids. We want to enjoy the beach safely. We can't enjoy the beach safely when there's cars on our beach. Our community citizens have tried to enjoy the beach and have been told to move by the police to make way for cars. And so again, this is our community, this is our beach. We want everyone to enjoy it, but beach driving, we don't think should be allowed. In fact, the Florida Department of Natural Resources in 1989 actually said beach driving is a dinosaur and it should be stopped. And that was in discussions with the county. The county chose to stop it at Amelia Island Resort and Summer Beach Resort, but to keep it at American Beach.
And, to your point, there was just last week a couple of teens who were run over on a beach in Sarasota County by a lifeguard. So it does happen. We have a call, I believe, from Kyle. Good morning, Kyle. Go ahead.
Yes.
To your point, there was just last week. Kyle, if you can turn down your radio and go ahead.
Yeah, sorry about that. My name's Kyle. I'm a resident of Bernardino Beach. I think there's a couple things going on here. Number one, they're saying it's an environmental issue with the turtles. So Nassau County has a really good program. If you go out during turtle nesting season, you'll see how many nests are identified. And not once have I heard of these nests being run over or anything like this. And number two, American Beach is, if you go to that area now, you see it filled up. It's no longer, you won't see any black people there. So it's mainly people with their vacation homes. And I think the main issue is they're tired of seeing, a bunch of people and cars on the beach. I do not believe this is an environmental issue. This is more of a restricting beach access to the public issue.
Thanks, Kyle. So we mentioned, Mark, this is a historic Black beach. It has seen a lot of growth recently, and it has become a more popular place for the entire community, not least because it does provide this beach driving access. To his question, though, he's saying this isn't about turtles. This is just about a community that doesn't want beach driving. Is that fair?
It's totally unfair. We have heard that we're trying to privatize the beach. We have no interest in privatizing the beach. Bernie Park has 200 parking spaces there. Evans Rendezvous in the heart of our community has about 50 parking spaces. So there's 250 parking spaces at American Beach that people can use. Come park your car, walk out to the beach, just like we do. We walk from our houses to the beach. We want people to use the beach. It is a beautiful beach. So, for someone to say we're trying to privatize the beach when there's 250 parking spaces in our community for people to park and use the beach, it's just foolishness. It's completely untrue.
It is interesting, as you say, the beaches adjacent to the north and the south, which are resort beaches, don't have beach driving. Those are not public beaches per se.
Correct.
They are somewhat privatized, and they are, mostly inaccessible unless you're, a patron.
Right. Well, what's interesting is we were the first resort on the island. American Beach was founded as a resort in 1935. If you go back and look at the historical documents, it refers to it as American Beach Resort. So, we were the first resort on the island. So when they passed the law in 1989, they protected Summer Beach Resort and Amelia Island Resort, but they did not protect American Beach Resort, even though we were the first resort on the island. So again, like I said, we've been asking since they passed that law in 1989 to treat us the same. We were the first resort community on the island. So why are other resorts being treated one way and we're being treated a different way?
What do we know, either of you, about the history of that agreement when it was reached in 1989, what those discussions were, and why it was that American Beach was essentially excluded from those conversations?
Well, I've reviewed the minutes from the May and June 1989 meetings. And if you take a look at those minutes, you will see that the representatives of Summer Beach and Amelia Island Resort met privately with the county, and they negotiated an agreement to pass this state law, but American Beach was not part of those discussions. So we were excluded from the discussions, which means we ended up having beach driving continuing in our community, but stopping at Amelia Island Resort and Summer Beach Resort. The minutes are very clear, and it tells tells a compelling story of how the county negotiated with Amelia Island Resort and Summer Beach Resort, but did not include American Beach as part of those discussions.
One of the comments that the caller made about, the preponderance or lack of Black people at the beach, is that relevant? Does that strike you as an accurate description?
It does not, and I would say to that, I mean, again, a lot of people in our community do not feel it's safe to use the beach because of the vehicles on the beach. So yes, I mean, he may be accurate in that you don't see a lot of African Americans or Blacks on the beach. It is because we have four-wheel drives all over the beach, and we don't feel it's safe for our kids to go out and play unless you're going to sit there and watch them 100% of the time. You can't let them just enjoy the beach. So yeah, I mean, I there's truth in what he says in terms of not seeing many Black people at the beach, but it's not because we don't want to go to the beach. It's because there's four-wheel drives all up and down our beach. And it's just unsafe to take your kids out to the beach.
And so how unified is the community in terms of this lawsuit? Are the people who live, property owners in the American Beach area, largely supportive of this lawsuit?
Yes. In our Property Owners Association, I would say 90% of our community supports the ending of beach driving. The other 10% also support ending beach driving, or they would prefer that the county open beach driving to the entire island. And I would say I'm against beach driving, but if the county did open up the entire island to beach driving, I wouldn't be here. We want to be treated the same as every other community on the island. So if you open up the island to beach driving, even though I don't support beach driving, I could live with that because my community is being treated the same. The issue for us is being treated differently than the rest of the island. Mm-hmm. That's the issue. And again, it's about protecting our dunes. People don't understand that, we have a dune study that shows we've lost up to 40 feet of our dunes, which means that the houses in our community are less protected when storms come. And that damage, then you get increased insurance costs, increased property damage. Again, we just want to be treated the same. Protect our properties like you protect everyone else's properties. Protect the turtles on our beach just like you protect the turtles on everyone else's beach. Just treat us the same. That's all we're asking.
What does the lawsuit or the research say, John, about, the ability of dunes to recover on a beach where there is driving?
Well, thankfully, we hired some experts to look just at that very issue earlier this year, and they saw through historical data that the beaches to the north and the south had been able to recover their dunes pretty substantially in just a couple years. So sand can aggregate. You can take policy decisions to allow dunes to recover, but unfortunately, Nassau County in this circumstance took the opposite approach and actually moved the western boundary even farther west to the toe of the dunes, partially because tides are getting higher and higher, and there's a conflict between the dunes and the ability to continue to allow beach driving. It's a challenge, and if they don't take the adequate conservation planning in place to fix that issue, I think they're going to have some issues moving forward.
Does that become an issue for drivers or for people who are trying to recreate on the beach outside of a vehicle? I mean, you're talking about a shrinking set of boundaries.
There's the most heartbreaking story about a woman who's been coming to American Beach since the 1930s, where they basically forced her to get off of her towel and move because there was literally no room for beach driving on a holiday at high tide a couple years back. So yes, it is a emerging conflict, and especially if you can imagine if the beach is completely filled with cars, what does a sea turtle do when it's emerging to its historical ancestral laying ground for nests? It's a very big problem.
We're talking about beach driving on American Beach in Nassau County, and if you'd like to join our conversation, you can give us a call at 904-549-2937. We have a call from Felicia in Jacksonville
Hi.
Beach. Good morning. Go ahead.
Good morning. I want to say I live in Jacksonville Beach. I am a property owner on American Beach as well. And being that the vehicles are allowed is eroding on the dunes, you can barely find place to go up. And I want to go up and sit on the beach with my family. There's hardly any room because of all the vehicles that are there, especially on the holidays. And when the young man said that turtles are protected, and those turtles are hatching, and when they are heading to the ocean, they're not protected. And they have found turtles that have been run over. People have witnessed it. So it really needs to stop driving on the beach for the people, for the environment, for the dunes, which is part of the environment, as well as for the turtles. And it's a big safety issue for all.
Thanks, Felicia. Mark, your thoughts.
Well, I agree 100% with what Felicia just said. I mean, it's a safety issue for the community, for the citizens of American Beach, but even for people who come visit American Beach. So I say we want all Nassau County to come and enjoy the beautiful beach. There's 250 parking spaces there. There's no need to drive on that beach. You can park like everyone else does, walk out to the beach, and then you can enjoy the beach because there wouldn't be all these trucks that are prohibiting you from enjoying the beach. As John said, with the tides coming in, you get less and less land there. And so we don't have driving lanes like they have at Peters Point. So, I mean, our area of beach is very small. And when you have a whole line of trucks for the whole half a mile, there's so little land for people to enjoy the beach that you just can't enjoy it.
Is that how much of beachfront there is there?
American Beach is half a mile of beachfront.
Wow.
Nassau County allows beach driving in about 1 mile of the property. They have 13 miles of beach. You can drive on 1 mile of it. And American Beach is half of that 1 mile.
And the other part is the Peters Point area?
Peters Point is about 4/10 of a mile, and then at Seaside Park is 1/10 of a mile.
Okay. And then is there still beach driving down in the southern end at the state park?
There is
portion?
beach driving at the state park, which is fine. I mean, I have no issue with people driving in a state park. Again, we have an issue with driving in a residential community. We are a residential community. We have an issue with the safety of driving on the beach through a residential community.
So, John, can you tell us what the process is when this lawsuit gets underway? I mean, we know that there's certain things that have to happen, this intent to sue. Now the suit has been filed. What are you waiting to hear from next?
Next, we're going to enter the discovery process where we get more details about what's happened on American Beach, and we're going to be able to prove that there has been the take of hatchlings on American Beach.
Explain what people don't know what a take is necessarily.
It can be harm, death, harassment, but this particular circumstance is death. We have proof. Anthony Shippian was on the beach on September 29th, 2020, when he and his wife saw a hatchling turtle that had been run over by a 4x4. And the same thing, Adam Lavala was with his family last year, and he saw a sea turtle that had been run over. And so once you establish that there's been a death of a threatened species under the Endangered Species Act, you are then required to take the actions necessary to ensure that it's not reasonably likely that sea turtle deaths will happen again in the future. And so that's what we're going to try to get an injunction to say, until you do that habitat conservation planning, you're not going to be able to allow beach driving on this beach anymore.
Is it your assertion that Nassau County kind of failed to do what it was supposed to do, or do we not know if they knew about these turtle deaths?
Well, in 2020, these images were emailed to Nassau County officials, and the acting county attorney and the county manager at the time in a public meeting stated that, like the other communities in Florida that allow beach driving, Volusia County, St. Johns County, Flagler County, it's required to get a habitat conservation plan. So it was admitted that that type of planning needs to occur. It's an expensive process, but with the knowledge now and the proof, affidavits on the record that this is happening, there's no real alternative than to complete that.
And so that's sort of what's unique
process.
in Nassau County is, unlike those other counties where beach driving is permitted, they don't have that federal permit.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's
All right.
correct.
Well, it's an interesting issue. It's a community story that we'll continue to follow. Mark Dawkins, John November, thank you both so much for being here. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
It's been a pleasure.
All right. Up
Yes.
next, where to find landscaping ideas and gardening tips. No green thumb required.
If you've never donated to the station before, that's okay. Public radio is available to everyone for free. But we do rely on listener support from those who are able to give. So join the community of supporters for Public Media Giving Days. And thanks.
Visit wjct.org/radio. Austin, Texas was known as a funky liberal haven in deep red Texas. Now there's big tech money pouring in and huge growth.
There was a warehouse district in the 80s and 90s, and there were all these punk clubs there. Now it's like gourmet chocolate and a $18 salad place.
Politics, prices, and the so-called PayPal mafia. How life is changing in one of the fastest growing cities in America. That's on the next On Point.
Today at 11 on WJCT News 89.9.
Americans consume more than 2 or 3 times the recommended daily amount of sugar. Now, HHS Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. says sugar is poison. For our next installment of our series, In Good Health, we dig into that claim with the experts and you. That's next time on 1A.
Today, starting at 10 on WJCT News 89.9.
Welcome back. Well, if you're looking to turn your yard into something more than a weekend chore, inspiration awaits. The destination Yardens of Riverside and Avondale are open for inspection and advice. And here to tell us about it is Shannon Blankenship. She's the Executive Director of Riverside Avondale Preservation. Good morning, Shannon.
Hi, Ann.
We're also welcoming Alex Rudnick, Yarden Tour Park Manager. Good morning, Alex.
Good morning.
So this is the 5th year now of the Yarden Tour. This is sort of a mashup of yards and gardens, right? But it's not just lawns and landscaping. I mean, there really is kind of an opportunity for people to go get inspired and, learn a little bit about how they can implement some of the stuff that they see and like.
100%. So Riverside and Avondale has so many unique backyards, front yards, side yards. And so gaining inspiration from your neighbors in terms of, what would fit here? What kind of maybe arbor, what kind of fountain, what kind of vegetable garden, is going to be a good blend in my backyard. I think being able to tour the neighborhood, no matter where you live, you're gaining inspiration from those homeowners to take it back home and grow your own fruits, vegetables, trees, bushes, flowers, whatever.
Alex, how do you keep it from being just kind of like that Instagram envy? Like, oh, they've got these great yards and this beautiful vegetable garden, and my yard is just kind of like a dispiriting mess.
I mean, I think you do what you can. You take what you can from what you see in the different yards and you can implement it piece by piece. We've got some master gardeners and a lot of great advice there too that you can learn from.
So that is a cool thing. I mean, you go to these yards, there actually are people on site that you can ask specific questions to.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah. And so how do you find those people? Are they affiliated with those particular yardens that they're in? And are they focused on different kinds of things like, whether it's an edible garden versus a, more manicured landscape?
Sure. So we try really hard to have a great diversity of garden styles on the tour. So you're going to see some folks that love flowers. We have one particular home this year. We call it Avendalia Manor, but we'll have over 300 dahlias in bloom at the time. And so she's taken her property and just, invested her heart and soul into flowers. And so you can sort of learn from the homeowner there what they've done. Another home is going to have a lot of raised beds vegetable gardening that you'll be able to see. Some of the other homes, I think, have really cute little manicured sections where you can see nice seating areas and bushes and shrubs. And a master gardener is going to be on site at every location with plant tags at every location. So you can identify plants, learn more about their benefits, and then ask questions about growing them at home.
Oh, cool. And so how do you select the people who are on display?
So first of all, anyone can nominate a neighbor, that's doing something really great. But really, we have a garden tour committee that is constantly roving the neighborhood, especially right now in spring, where everything is blossoming and beautiful. And then we'll put forth a prospect list so that way we can reach out and make sure we get that diversity of vegetable gardening, native plants, and other styles.
Because you like it to be a mix like that.
Yeah. So the tour will be dynamic for everyone that joins.
So in addition to being, just kind of a cool thing to wander around and to do and to learn from, it's also a fundraiser, right? This is about kind of helping the Riverside Avondale Parks community.
Yeah, that's correct. So Riverside Avondale Preservation Board decided last year that all the proceeds from the Yarden Tour will be used in the parks in the neighborhood. So there's actually a park on the tour this year, John Murray Forbes Park, and that has been really restored. We want everybody to see it. It was used as a construction staging area for many years, and now it's
a beautiful riverfront park.
This kind of runs like a linear park sort of in front of St. Vincent?
That's it. Yep.
Yeah.
So Riverside, Avondale, the Parks Department, and St. Vincent's really worked to build it up so you can come by.
And so what is the goal with that park, or what has been done to kind of make that a better experience than like a construction staging area?
Well, it didn't take much, but no, we did a lot. We added pathways. There are benches there now, and there's this really beautiful large planter that's really eye-catching, along with the name of the park in large letters. And some of the funding from the Yard and Tour went to make that happen.
And there is also some focus on Riverside Park. Is that true?
So some of the funding from the proceeds last year also went to enhancing the entrance of Riverside Park, as well as a few other pocket parks in the neighborhood. So yeah, the proceeds of this event we're trying to spread throughout the neighborhood to really enhance the parks that a lot of people from all over Jacksonville frequent often.
Gotcha. So this is kind of the day before Mother's Day, May 10th, and it starts at 10. What do people, how do they get there, first of all, and how do they get about the tour? Is this sort of like a walking, biking?
Sure. So tickets are $20. I think it's a great way to spend the day with your mom. You can bike it, you can walk it. The properties are going to be spread throughout the neighborhood. It's a great time to take in brunch or coffee or other, great food in the neighborhood while you're there, because you have all day 10 to 4 to explore 7 different homes, 1 commercial space, and 1 park that have all been, will be totally focused on yards and gardens for that day.
All right. Well, we've got a link to the event on our website with this story, but I hope it's a great event. It sounds like a lot of fun.
Thank you, Anne.
All right.
Yeah.
Shannon Blankenship and Alex Rednick, appreciate you being here. And thank you for listening. Thanks for calling in. If you have comments or suggestions for future segments, you can send an email to firstcoastconnect@wjct.org. And please join us tomorrow when our news panel discusses the biggest headlines, from abandoned animals to a push to regulate e-bikes. I'm Ann Schindler. You've been listening to First Coast
Region. More information available at northfloridatpo.com. AEG presents Hauser, The Rebel is Back Tour. The Croatian cellist brings his blend of classical, pop, and rock music to the St. Augustine Amphitheater on Sunday, May 18th at 8 p.m. Information at theamp.com.